How's it going, guys? I've been promising this preservation guide for a couple weeks now, and I am going to be honest, the main reason why I have taken so long to do it is I have been a little bit busy, practicing for AWC and whatnot, but I also kind of felt like maybe I had like a little bit of like a competitive edge over some of my competitors with, having this feeling that preservation was actually really good, kind of like behind the scenes. We're seeing a lot in EU, but not as much on NA. So I've been kind of like holding off putting this guide out just in case other people were interested in picking up the preservation. I don't really know if anything in this would be of value of some of the players that already play it, but I don't know. I'm just kind of weird, but this is what I'm going to be talking about in my guide. If you feel like you already know some of this stuff and you want to like kind of skip around, or if you're kind of looking for like a TLDR and just can kind of fast forward, like you don't care about stat prio, whatever. So the first thing I want to talk about with Evoker's pros and cons is the pros are incredible. You know what I mean? Like you see it time and time again. As a preservation Evoker, you can do some serious like DPS damage. I'm actually pretty convinced that if you could play double healer in a game as a preservation, if you had someone else backing you up, I'm pretty convinced you could probably do very similar to actual DPS class damage if you're able to attack the entire game. Like, keep in mind, like right here, I did almost half of a warrior's damage, but that's with also doing 7 million healing. You know what I mean? So the class can like do some serious damage. Another one of the a big pro that they have is I think that they might actually have some of like the highest healing, like just raw healing throughput, especially on multiple targets. Like I think they're like really good in PvE for that reason. Their healing spells overall are just incredible. I mean, this is 80k HPS and a soul shuffle. I mean, yeah, I would say the biggest pros that they have are just kind of like the damage and the healing. Like one of the comparisons I like to make is because I'm a shaman main is I compare it to shaman, and I always say like, why would I want to play resto shaman when I can play an evoker and do more damage and more healing and also even have better mana, because you kind of have like a nice mana restore talent here with energy loop. Talking about the cons, the first thing that should come to mind is the fact that you have a 25-yard range. 25-yard range means that you're going to be very susceptible to crowd control, especially versus like, for example, I think the biggest bane of my existence on a preservation evoker, and if you guys are also playing preservation evoker and you're struggling into sub rogue is really hard for preservation evoker for multiple reasons. The first reason is if this is your partner and he's getting attacked by rogue, you go ahead and do one of this, boom, you just walked yourself right into a gouge, you walked yourself right into a kidney. I could already see WizK walking in to full fear me right after that. So sub rogues are kind of like immediately more difficult just based off of positioning a 25-yard range, and you also have to like understand that the range is, kind of like shorter just based on the fact that your main heal kind of like takes you literally into the fight. So that's obviously, very difficult is, the cons with the range. And like I said as well, like sub rogues are really hard for you. And another class that is really hard for me personally when I play preservation is boomkin. Every other healer in the game doesn't have to deal with root beam. If you play a shaman, you can spirit walk out. If you play a priest, you could be a gnome. If you play paladin, you could be a dark iron dwarf or freedom yourself. You get out of like every other one. Mistweavers can be a gnome. Resto druids obviously can shift out of them. So basically from a tournament meta, the only healer that could get put into a root beam is a preservation evoker. We'll talk about the town a little bit later, but you can kind of play obsidian metal to try and counteract that a little bit. Another one of the biggest cons that you have as a preservation evoker is getting rooted. Getting rooted is just unbelievably painful, man. If you get rooted, you can't use rescue, you can't use verdant embrace, and it's just a pain. You gotta do what you can. Dispel them when you can. Sometimes it gets really awkward if you have like a stasis and you put your stasis up and then you want to verdant, so you get a good stasis value, but then you have to dispel the root, and then that takes your first dispel, and it's just, it is such an unbelievable headache getting rooted. So obviously I'd say in a lot of the situations the pros definitely outweigh the cons. I'm going to kind of like go through my macros fairly quickly here, just based on the fact that I think that a lot of them are very self-explanatory. This is Kick Arena 1, this is Dispel Party 1, this is a stop casting for me to use my interrupt, just in case I'm like casting something and I need to kick, I just press my bind. This is a cursor deep breath, so if you guys are wondering like how I just like shoot my landslide or my deep breath without like that, like long path looking like green thing, I don't actually like seeing it. It just gives me, like, it's just an extra click, so I don't actually like doing that. I do the same thing with all my totems. So at cursor, focus interrupt. This is a help harm macro, so if you're interested in using this, basically, if you're targeting an enemy, and I don't actually play this talent anymore, so it's like kind of irrelevant. But if you're targeting an enemy, it'll use Unravel if you're spec'd into it. I'm currently not spec'd into it. I haven't been spec'd into it in a while. And if you're targeting a friendly, it'll just use your Dispel. This is an at cursor rescue, same thing. You don't need to put the little green circle on the ground. At cursor Dreamflight, I don't really spec into Dreamflight ever anymore, but I do have the macro just in case. Landslide at cursor, we already talked about that one. Arena 2 and 3 kick, and there should be an Arena 1 kick around here, but Spell Party 1. Focus Sleepwalk, Focus Unravel. I don't really use Unravel. Spell Party 2 and Arena Sleep 1, 2, 3. I use Focus macros and Arena macros for like kick and Arena Sleep like that. Is it super important? Not necessarily. You know, some people ask me like, hey, why do you have a Focus macro and you have Arena 1, 2, 3 macros? And the simple answer is because when I was learning to play WoW, I didn't use Arena 1, 2, 3 macros, and Focus macros were always first. So Focus macros are like kind of my comfort bind, and then like Arena 1, 2, 3 is if I just don't feel like switching my targets around too much. This Obsidian Scales macro is actually quite nice. Basically, what this does is when I press my Obsidian Scales, it turns my Obsidian Scales into a different icon. And it won't let me press another Obsidian Scales unless I don't press the button for 10 seconds. So if you ever like double tapped your Obsidian Scales and use 2 charge to wall, this kind of takes it away. So you see it turns into like a chest icon here. It won't let me press it again until 10 seconds of the Obsidian Scales are used. So you never double click it. You could put it at like, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, but you know, now it becomes available again. This is stop casting stasis, same reason I talked about earlier. If I'm like, you know, casting something and I just want to press stasis instead, it just instantly cancels my cast. Focus Azure Strike, not super important. At cursor swoop up. I don't really play swoop up too much these days, but you know, still I like the at cursor macros. This is a macro to rescue your party 1 and party 2 without having to target them, and then, you know, it's an add cursor to also rescue. So like, for example, I was having issues where like I'd be dying and all of a sudden like I would need to target my party member and then also like press the rescue. Is kind of awkward. So like this is just a lot easier. Like I'm dying, I'm just like spamming like, you know, party rescue 1 or like party rescue 2, and it kind of like saves me in those kind of situations. This is at target of target disintegrate, kind of helpful just if you don't feel like targeting enemies sometimes. I have a Cancel Aura Stasis in my drink macro. Cancel Aura Stasis is still useful. You can't really do anything like fancy with Cancel Aura Stasis anymore. Like at the start of the expansion, you used to be able to Cancel Aura Stasis, dispel yourself out of CC, or Cancel Aura Stasis, dispel yourself with like Cauterizing Flame, things like that. But what I will say is that, you know, this is probably a bug. You know, I'm a filthy bug abuser, that when you Cancel Aura Stasis, you can use it off global as opposed to pressing the stasis and it being on global. So if I were to cancel my stasis right here, it uses a global. But if I just press my cancel aura stasis, it shoots out all the heals and doesn't use a global. So definitely something that is very useful, especially because sometimes I immediately pop my stasis after using an echo. So instead of like echoing and then popping stasis and waiting for that global of the echo, you could literally just echo pop stasis with cancel aura and boom, you instantly shoot out all your healing. So I would recommend having a cancel aura stasis. So we'll go over add-ons right now. I'll go over all the add-ons I use, and obviously I think the most important ones are weak auras. Big debuffs is like what shows like, you know, the enlarged CC, like if one of my teammates is in a kidney shot or like one of those important CCs that you need to see, a polymorph, things like that. It's really nice to see the important ones. If you use big debuffs, you're going to notice that if you use the extra debuff scripts that they don't work together. I don't know how to fix that. I just personally stopped using the additional debuff scripts and started using big debuffs instead. And I used to not like that because I like to see a lot of debuffs, but there was times where I'd be fighting against an assassination rogue and my teammate has 65,000 bleeds on him, and I can't even see that he's in a stun, and like that kind of drove me crazy. Details is obviously just the very, very good you know, way to track stats or whatnot. Like if you're playing with someone and you know you got, you know, little Chrome here and you got this guy here and you're like, yo, why are you doing just a little bit less damage? You can literally just kind of like break it down, you know, see everything. They're different specs, so it's completely irrelevant, but you know, it just kind of helps you understand everything. Diminish options, something that I just started using recently. I don't even know if I can show it because I think I need to be in a party for it. But what this does is you could change a whole bunch of stuff. So right here, if these were my arena frames, I could see I have it set to only incapacitate and stun. I could see when my teammates and myself are still on those diminishes, which is pretty important. Like, it basically, sub rogues maybe get this. Like, you know, who's gonna die? Who's gonna die? Who's gonna die? Oh, okay, Trill's not able to be stunned for another 2 seconds. Okay, you could be stunned right now. Now we got to be a little scared. So this is really nice. You could do, you know, a whole bunch of stuff to, you know, toggle different things, whatever. My slot, unless you're like playing multiple characters, you don't really need this, but basically you just kind of like, you know, my slot, export. Like if you're playing on Tournament Realms or something, you can export your whole UI, then you would import that, copy it, whatever. Nameplate buffs is the add-on I use for my nameplates. I'll just show you what that looks like, I guess. So if I get like a sleepwalk on this guy, you see it over there. If I get like a, you know, fire breath on these guys, all that stuff, you see like stuns and whatnot over their heads. Obviously, very nice. Omnibar is what I use to test my interrupts. It is absolutely disgusting. I mean, you kind of need Omnibar. I would say that there's a good chance that I go overkill with it. Yeah, that's my Omnibar. There's a chance I'm a little overkill with it. But basically, I've decided that... let me just take a screenshot here. I've decided that if you're interested in setting up your Omnibar similar to me, I kind of have like all the generic stuff here. I have all kicks over here, and then I have like what I like to think is like setup CC over here. So like, you know, like, oh man, does he have a spell reflect? I look over here. Oh man, are there any kicks available? I look here, and then like at a quick glance, like, oh, like, is there any setup CC? Is there a kidney? Is there a Hodge? Like whatever. Is there Stormbolt? So that's kind of why I have like 3 separate spaces for them. It doesn't really look like that in Arena, but yeah, like there's definitely not a ton. Omni CD is what allows me to see my partner's cooldowns. Like that one's really nice. It just shows like my partner's cooldowns. You can put them wherever you want. I just have them like at the top of their frames, like right here. See, I just get to see all their CDs, and then the diminished options are right here if that's something you're interested in. Oh, I also see their interrupts too, for when my teammates miss kicks and I get to yell at them. So Omni CD obviously really important, and stuff like this is also like super important, especially without communication. Like if you're doing shuffle and whatnot, like you kind of need to see everything. Party pet fix is how you can fix the pet frame on your raid frames. I don't know why it's still bugged, if it even still is bugged, but yeah. S Arena updated is just basically the new S Arena. Trophy GCD is what I use to help you guys out. This is nothing that you really need, but if you're interested in seeing your own globals and you record your own gameplay or something, or you even stream yourself, you can use Trophy GCD. And then the last thing is weak auras. Weak auras are obviously really nice. If you ever go into my stream, you could do exclamation WA, and I have a whole bunch of healer weak aura packages, but you know, just some of the stuff that I have here by default, you can see there's so much. I have a precog weak aura. I have a weak aura for you know, my ancient flame. I have a weak aura for when BM's falling, temporal compression weak aura here. There's not really a way for me to link all these to you guys, but yeah, if you're watching, you kind of have to go from YouTube to my stream, or you can just like probably Google like temporal compression weak aura, because all these are on WAG.io or whatever. But the temporal compression weak aura is actually like kind of important, because there's some times where like you'll have like 3 stacks of this, and you'll be like doing a fire breath, or you're doing a spirit bloom, and all you got to do is literally just, you know, throw out a reversion or throw out an echo, and then you get that temporal compression buff, which, you know, it's just this is just money in the bank here. It's all about essences, and that gives you more mana and whatnot. Nullifying Shroud weak aura, that shows you like how long you have it available and how many stacks you have. This is actually really nice. Precog, this is actually really nice too. I don't really use it on Evoker, but if you play other healers. Weak auras for amp curse, like, you know, because you can call off the amp curse, like someone's crit immune. Pretty nice for, you know, shuffle or whatever. Time of need cooldown. But yeah, I mean, you could find all this in my stream chat, even if I'm offline. Exclamation WA, and it'll be under the healer package, I believe. Weak aura is obviously really, really important. We'll go over stat prios and enchants. Enchants are like pretty simple these days. Cloak, you could do speed or avoidance. I don't really think it matters. I personally do speed. Chest, you do reserve of intellect because it gives you a little bit of mana. Bracers, you could do speed or avoidance. Once again, I do speed. You have a shadowed belt clasp, which was added this patch. Gives you 106 stamina, pretty similar to the boot enchant. Pants, you use the intellect mana restore. Boots, I use stamina. Some people use speed, kind of up to you. My enchants on my rings are mastery, depending on like where your stats are balanced at. It can be verse, it can be haste. It's kind of up to you. I'll show you that in a second. And on my weapon, I use Sophic, and last patch I used wafting, but I kind of feel like I haven't needed extra haste, which is why you see mastery on my rings right now. I used to go full haste, but right now my stats are 29% mastery, 38%, sorry, 29% haste, 38% mastery, 28% burst. On Tournament Realms, it's a little bit different. it's actually like 27 haste, 44 mastery. So basically around like the 27, 28, percent haste, I don't really necessarily think that I need anymore. So, it could be the same for you guys where you could start going for a little bit more mastery. The numbers don't have to be perfect, but basically a note compared to like what I did in previous season is I'm not like full sending the mastery. I could probably get to like 35% if I wanted to. Sorry, I'm not full sending the haste. I could probably get to like 35% or something if I want to, but it just doesn't feel as necessary as it did before. I think part of the reason why is the new 4-piece. You get more essence procs. At the same time, I also feel like I have more time to like Living Flame for damage in this season specifically. I think the game pacing maybe got like a little bit slower unless you're fighting, Trill R One Dance. And then when you're doing these offensive Living Flames, you get the essence proc. And when you get the essence proc, then you could just disintegrate for mana, or you could send out free echoes or whatever. So it doesn't feel like you need as much haste as you did before. I still like some. I know a lot of EU evokers are opting out of innate magic. I personally am not agreeing with that. I still think that innate magic is really good. Meh, who's also a really good evoker, winning a bunch of EU tourneys, plays with about 20% haste. You can mess around with it, you know what I'm saying? I personally just still feel like I heal pretty efficiently, and kind of like the haste point where I'm at. And I like dropping this just seems like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like not for like 4% damage or anything. So I don't know. So obviously a little bit of different opinions. Water. The reason why this is silly is because the water that you buy from a vendor is actually not good as water that you can craft. I don't actually know how to craft it, so I just buy it from the auction house. It's very simple. It is just called Delicious Dragon Spittle. So if you're buying water from a vendor, it's literally just not as good as this water. I don't know why. It's just not as good. Keep in mind you can't use water in Solo Shuffle, but you definitely need to buy the Dragon Spittle from the auction house, or you're kind of griefing yourself. For crafted gear, the pieces that I personally like are the boots, the Infurious boots, and the Adaptive Draconithist arm guards. I feel like both of these pieces kind of just give me like the most stats that I'm able to get. This gives me intellect, this gives me all stats. Another really good option is the Spore Cloak. Spore Cloak's really good, especially if you're dying often. Like if you're fighting a sub-rogue, like a Spore Cloak is super good to throw on. If you're getting attacked or like taking like splash damage fairly often, I think Adaptive Arm Guards are probably better than Boots or Reprieve. But like if you're not taking damage frequently, I would say the Arm Guards are not going to be better than the Spore Cloak. But I don't actually have all the options on live. On TR, I kind of have all three, and I kind of cycle between Spore Cloak, Adaptive, and Boots. But these two are definitely the two that I play the most. But just, yeah, the Spore Cloak is another option. And then in terms of other stuff, like I don't think you really need to craft anything for just stats. Like a lot of other classes, like kind of just need to. Oh, I do have a crafted ring for a second haste ring. This is actually not super like important. You could totally just buy a mastery ring instead. And just kind of balance out the stats the way you want it to. I didn't have to do this. I originally had precog, I think, on this ring, and I decided just to, kind of scrap the precog because didn't feel like I was like faking a lot on Evoker. Faking feels really awkward on Evoker, like imagine faking one of these and then you don't get the kick. I'm gonna get you, bro. I'm gonna get you. Like, it feels so weird. But yeah, I basically stopped using precog on Evoker, and I know this gem isn't the max rank gem. I'm lazy. But yeah, tier gear, I personally like 4 pieces. I know some people use 2 pieces. I personally think that the 4 pieces are really good. And the piece you skip out on is the shoulders. I do have the correct pieces here: helm, chest, gloves, and legs. And these are literally just your best stats. So it's like you're gaining 4 piece at essentially the cost of nothing. Your best stats are haste, verse, and mastery. And just look at it: mastery, haste, haste, verse, mastery, verse, haste, mastery. Like it's literally just perfectly statted pieces, so you're just getting an extra bonus. If you're just trying to juice up in certain matchups and like all mastery, I will say there's been times where like I queue against Rogue Mage and I have the Spore Cloak on, I put on 2 extra mastery pieces, I don't play the 4 piece, whatever. But in general speaking, for ladder, I think 4 piece is really good. It is technically 6 in PvP, but I just want to kind of like show you the power of 4 piece. So if you have 4 stacks of Temporal Compression, if you don't know what this is, it's a Spark of Insight right here. It's a really important talent. If you're not playing it, you're doing something wrong. When you use your final Empower spell, so let's just pretend this is 5 here. If this was PvP, it wouldn't proc at 4. and you have a temporal compression, you're immediately going to get 2 essence bursts, and this just allows you to kind of like swing the tide in your favor at any point in a match. Like when you're getting these procs, you could either do a ton of damage or a ton of healing. Like you're just gonna have multiple essence burst procs, which means you could like you could echo, you know, double dream breath people because you're just super overcapped on essences, or you could just spam disintegrate. I personally like I kind of like spamming disintegrate when I have essence burst procs because it's the best way to get your mana back. But yeah, you kind of see the power of this 4-piece right here. So you're going to go for a Flame Breath, and we're instantly going to get 2. You want to use 1 immediately because you're going to get another one. So you do a Disintegrate into a Disintegrate into a Disintegrate. They're all free. Then you could even do a 4th Disintegrate right there. So right there, we got like 21,600 mana, if my math is correct, from those 4 Disintegrates right there. And it just costs us absolutely nothing. So then also, because you did that, you know, you shoot out multiple Living Flames. It's most likely going to give you another proc. And, you know, there you go, another 26,000 mana right there from that 4-piece procking basically, and then also the hundreds of thousands of damage you're doing. So I really like the 4-piece. I think the 4-piece is amazing. There's also times where you can get that 4-piece proc, and you can just start doing a lot of healing with it. I don't actually track the 4-piece proc with like a weak R or anything. I just kind of always know when it procs because it's impossible to get 2 essence bursts from using 1 Empower unless your 4-piece procs. So right here, when I use this Empower, and I get 2 essence bursts, I know that my 4-piece procs immediately, but I'll just show you like what you can do with the 4-piece proc, for example. Like I've done some stuff like this before, so like let's just do a thing here. I'll literally like, you know, echo, 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 and then I can just get 6 dream breaths out with that. I don't know why I didn't get an echo myself, but I got a double there, and a double there, and you can do stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, you can be really flexible with the essence burst procs. Essence burst is insane. So yeah, tier gear, you definitely want all 4. We'll talk about spec and honor talents. I would say that this build right here is what I play the most, okay? So there's a couple different things about this spec that not everyone plays. So like some people like to go down this way. Some people like to go down this way. I kind of feel like I don't have the talent points for it. I'm currently right now not playing Renewing Blaze, which some people might think is a little you know, insane. I just don't really see myself dying that often as Evoker, and yeah, I don't know. Basically this build right here is like maximum Living Flame and Fire Breath damage and healing because I have 2 of these. Natural Convergence is super important with Energy Loop because you want to make sure those Disintegrates are ticking faster in order for you to get your mana back, so that's why you take Natural Convergence. And I'm not 100% sure of this, but I actually just think the Stamina is good for defense, but I also think the Stamina is actually more damage on your Living Flame and your Fire Breath than 4% damage increase, just based on the fact that you do more damage based on your health. So I actually feel like this is a defensive/offensive talent, as opposed to this just being offensive. So this is like my what should I call this? My aggressive build, I guess, baseline. If when I queue Shuffle, I switch this talent here because you kind of need all the healing you can get. And this is what I've been queuing in Shuffle. I'm not insane by any means, but I'm doing pretty decent. You could also in Shuffle do this if you want, where you don't play Disintegrate. But one thing I will say is I actually notice a lot not having Fauna Magic with that 1 less Living Flame. It's actually kind of a big deal for my POV. You could also maybe do something like this as well in Shuffle. You know, you could bounce around these talents, but this is just kind of what I roll with. So this is kind of like my standard offensive build. I will say when I queue into Sub-Rogues, I generally think it's not going to go down to mana, and I do kind of do something like this instead. Yeah, Sub-Rogues, I basically move the Energy Loop from Time of Need, and Time of Need actually scales with the increased Living Flame healing. So playing Time of Need into Sub-Rogues, like when you're low, it's actually really nice. Also, if I was queuing into Sub-Rogue, I'd probably play like Max Survivability if I think I'm dying. And since I'm no longer playing Energy Loop, I could actually take points out of like this stuff and play, you know, like Magic Damage Reduction. This works on like Secret Tech and things like that. And then also, like, if you want Renewing Blaze, like you can do that if you want. So this is basically like my standard damage spec, and then I also have like what I like to call a heal build. I played this multiple times in the tourney. I play this with, like, you know, we queue like some Warrior Boomy when I'm not playing with a Rogue anymore, and I just need like a little bit more healing. I like this build a lot. Basically, I'm no longer spec'd into Enkindled because I don't have like the stronger Living Flame, so I take the damage increase instead. You can also use these as flex points as well if you want, like, you know, Renewing, or if you want Terror of the Skies, or you just want like some magic damage reduction. Those are definitely your flex points there for sure. And in this build, compared to the last build, you have the full Dream Breath healing. You have the Empath, which is actually really nice. We'll talk about that in a second. And you also have the short time dilation, which is really nice. I still think it's really important to always take 2 stacks of Essence Burst, because if you ever proc your 4-piece, you would immediately lose out on one of those stacks of Essence Burst if you don't have this. And if you ever shoot Leaping Flames and you hit multiple targets with your Living Flame and that gives you a double proc, you'd miss out. So the reason why I like Empath a lot is because when you stasis an Empath, you have that essence regen for a bit that you can see, and then when you pop that stasis, you get like kind of that Empath again. So you know you get double value out of that talent right there, and it feels really nice. The short CD doesn't feel as good because it doesn't really feel like you need to use it on CD. So I kind of like the extra essence there, because you could be a little bit more flexible if you want to use damage to get some mana back, or if you just want to get more echoes out or whatever. It feels pretty nice. So I would say like the main specs I have here are kind of like the damage build and the healing build. And then, just a couple flex points, whether you want to do like, have a little bit more survivability, or if you're like queuing into sub rogue, and you want time of need, things like that. Time of need is like pretty good in sub rogues. I'll generally almost always play this in the sub rogue, especially because we struggle in the sub rogues. So this just gives you like a little bit of healing when you're CC'd. Let's talk about honor talents. Honor talents, I barely swap. I barely swap. I think the main change I use on honor talents is I almost always use these 3. This is insane for stopping CC. This is insane for healing. I go from scoring flame to like Obsidian Metal if I'm fighting against Boomkins. If you're getting trained by melee, you definitely have the option to play on Bird and Flight. You could play Chrono Loop if you're feeling a little cheeky, but I think Time Stop's awful. Swoop Up is like very niche. I think Divide and Conquer is really bad. Dreamcatcher kind of just ooms you, if I'm being honest. It's 5,000 mana, 6,000 mana per sleep. So if you're just getting kind of freaky and just spamming sleep, you're just going to run yourself out of mana. So these are kind of just like the ultimate 3 talents. You get the Purge, you get the Shroud, you get the Dream Projection. A little boring that you can't really do too much with it, but I mean, you can have some fun with Chrono Loop. I've done it before. I actually think that like Chrono Loop is probably pretty good versus like Disc Priest. I've used it before versus Disc Priest. The Purge is like strongest into like Resto Druid and Resto Shaman. You can purge like reversions off Evokers and like forts and shields and stuff, but yeah, I mean, these are the main 3 talents. The other ones are kind of like super niche and try them if you want them type thing. Feels really hard to actually land kills with Swoop Up. Chrono Loop is one of those things where you try and time it really well. Can work out really well. I've used it in Shuffle before. Might actually be pretty decent in Shuffle because you can like get swap a lot of times, but yeah. And then Divide and Conquer is just terrible. It's a 2-minute cooldown. You just line your teammates. Like, it's just going to make them rage. So the healing rotation. Evoker is, from like the outside looking in, pretty generally like easy. There's a couple of things that maybe make it a little bit more difficult. The first thing we should talk about is Echo. Echo basically doubles your healing spell on like every healing spell. It doesn't work on like Dream Projection. It doesn't work on Rewind. I think it doesn't work on Emerald Communion. Those are, yeah, some of the spells it doesn't work on. But yeah, as you can see, when you cast a spell that's not Echo, it'll be replicated. So for example, like let's just use this hot right here. This is really basic stuff. I shouldn't be talking about this probably, but 1 reversion, and then if we echo, and we put up a reversion, then it's 2. One thing to keep in mind is pretty generally good to keep up 2 of these, just based on the fact that this talent is actually 10% per reversion. This is something that people don't realize, so if you can keep up 2 reversions, you should, because this is 20% heal increase. That's only 10% heal increase, so you're kind of hurting yourself a little bit if you're not keeping those up there. So yeah, you have Echo Reversion as your main hot. Your main heal is Verdant Embrace. Your big power spells are the Dream Breath, and they are the Spirit Bloom. And then outside of that, if you're kind of out of gas, you have no echoes and reversions. And keep in mind, reversion's actually still pretty decent heal. Like if they already have a reversion right here, and someone's dying and you have no Verdant, you have no Dream Breath, you have no Verdant, you have no Dream Breath, you have no Spirit Bloom, but you still have echoes and your reversion's available. If they're taking spike damage, you actually heal like quite a bit from Golden Hour, which is they heal for 15% of the damage they took in the last 5 seconds. So if they're getting spiked, an Echo or Reversion, even if they already have the hot, is actually 100% fine. So right here we had a 57,000 Golden Hour hit. When you Echo the Reversion, it heals the Golden Hour 2 times. So that would have been 114,000 heal just from an Echo Reversion. So it's got like a little bit of a burst heal mechanic to it. One thing I will say right now, and the only reason I'm going to mention this is because I was watching Ven play Preservation, and I'm not trying to give him a hard time at all, I'm just trying to use him as an example, is he didn't know you can Echo multiple targets. And this is something that's huge because I actually very, very, very much like to double echo before I Dream Breath. So like, let's just say this is Sam and Trill. You know, Sam's over here probably getting kicked on CD. Trill's over here one-shotting people. I like to echo, and then throw a Dream Breath. So then you get the double Dream Breath here. You get the double Dream Breath there. So you can have multiple echoes out at the same time to actually get, you know, the double echoed Spirit Blooms, or, you know, a double echoed Verdant Embrace or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty nice. So yeah, I mean, you have your main heal, like basically your echo reversions and your Verdant Embrace. You kind of want to always echo before every heal if possible. It's not always possible. We'll talk about that in a second. These things should be getting pressed on CD. I would say for the most part, it wasn't always like this, and you definitely can if you are using them on CD, and sometimes I'll play a matchup and I use them too frequently, and I feel like I need to kind of like slow down a little bit with using it. But Dream Breath and Spirit Bloom are very, very, very expensive. So I would say for the most part, I kind of do use them on CD because damage is like kind of high these days, but just be careful because they can you, especially if you're using them on single target, because they're like super powerful AoE abilities. I generally only one tap my Dream Breath in almost every single situation. I am like totally okay with just putting up a long Dream Breath hot to kind of like get most, you know, value out of it. I don't really need the burst healing. I will say I like to double tap or triple tap my Spirit Bloom, just because if I do a 3 charge compared to a 1 charge, you're just gaining HPS at the 3 charge for the same cost of mana. This heals 1 person, 2 person, 3 person. So if I can heal multiple people with this Spirit Bloom for the same cost as healing 1 person, I'll take that any day of the week. But when you one-tap a Dream Breath, it's not actually like increasing your HPS. It's just putting up a longer hot duration, which is completely fine. So yeah, the Dream Breath and the Spirit Bloom are your 2 Empower spells for healing. So another thing I want to talk about is Life Bind. I think Life Bind is like one of those things that just kind of happens. Life Bind you get from Verdant Embrace. Life Bind is whenever you Verdant Embrace someone, they get a Life Bind, but you also get a Life Bind as well. And any of that healing that you do shares. One thing I want to say, by the way, is you should never echo into an echo. If you ever echo into an echo on yourself, it just gets wasted. Like, it just refreshes. It's really bad to do. You want to make sure you never do that. It's okay to echo here, then echo here, because then you can put multiple hots, but you never want to echo on top of an echo. Echo doesn't work on echo. But you basically just wasted your essence if you did that. So yeah, if I Verdant Embrace this guy, I always get the Life Bind, and he always gets the Life Bind as well. Life Bind is one of those things that kind of happens, but you definitely can like try to like manipulate Life Bind healing, especially considering that one always goes on you. If you're gonna like do like a big AoE heal, so for example, like if I want to get like a big Spirit Bloom off, sometimes I Spirit Bloom with no echo, no essences for echo, because I'm out of essences. So like, you know, I could do like an echo here and then a Verdant Embrace here, and what this is gonna do is he gets a Life Bind here because of the echo, he gets a Life Bind here because I Verdant Embrace them, and then I get a Life Bind. And if you do that, it's a triple Life Bind, and then if you get off a triple Spirit Bloom, you all get hit with that Spirit Bloom, and then you all take an extra 40% healing. So you're abusing Life Bind that way as well. It's really easy to get a triple Life Bind because you don't need a double echo. You could just echo one person and then Verdant Embrace the other person. But the biggest and most important thing with Life Bind, in my opinion, is getting off a big commune. Okay, this is echoed Life Bind commune. Okay. This is also really important in Deep Damp and Shuffle, is if I echo this guy and Verdant this guy, that's going to give us the triple Life Bind. You do it, and then you press Commune, and you're going to see all this extra healing over their heads, right? You see all that? That's all from Life Bind. Like, that's what makes, like, the Emerald Communion so big. Like, you want to try and always Emerald Communion with at least one Life Bind. If you ever see someone die through a communion, it's probably because they didn't Life Bind it, because that essentially increases the healing by, I mean, like 80% or something, right? Like if I Life Bind one person, he's getting 40% of my healing here, then he's taking 40% of his healing there or whatever. Like, I don't know. It's just some crazy number. Then if you get the triple out, it's just, you know, 120%. It's just cracked. So you always want to abuse Life Bind with Emerald Communion. But yeah, Life Bind is like I said, it's one of those things that just happens. Like, you just get Life Bind up all the time because you're Verdant Embracing. It's actually probably pretty good in general to never cast a Verdant Embrace on yourself because you always get the Life Bind to maximize your HPS. Spark of Insight this is really important, and this is a weak art that I have that shows you these temporal compressions. One thing that I noticed is that it's really easy to start casting, like, you know, a damage spell when I'm at 3 stacks of this, and like whenever I cast an empower spell, the first thing I do is I look here and it's like, oh crap, like I have 3. Just gonna toss out a single reversion. Now I have 4. Now I get this essence burst. You know what this essence burst does for me? It gives me 5400 mana from energy loop, or it gives me 4200 mana because my echo doesn't cost mana anymore. So it's literally like, you know, like right here, I want to do a Dream Breath. Let's just toss out an Echo Reversion. You know what I mean? And then we could Echo, and then Dream Breath. Like, whatever. You just want to make sure that you, generally speaking, especially if you're at 3, always try to get to that 4 stacks of temporal compression before you shoot out an Empowered spell, and that's going to help you be much more efficient. Much more efficient. It's super easy to get to 4 as well. Now, in regards to Echo, one thing that I want to talk about here is the main goal is to definitely try and echo before every single heal. But there's definitely multiple times in games where I will Verdant without echo. So like, for example, right here, okay? My teammate's dying right now. I'm going to echo without a Verdant. And the reason why is because I want to get a double Dream Breath on him. So I Verdant for the 40% Dream Breath buff. And then I had 2 essences left, so I could just echo and Dream Breath. So there's definitely times in games where you're going to be single target reversioning with no echo. You're going to single target Verdant Embrace with no echo, and sometimes even single target Spirit Bloom with no echo, because you're just kind of out of essences and you just kind of need to send it. Sometimes, like for example, if my main target's taking damage, like let's just use these 2 because this is 3s. Like, my main target's taking damage right here, I will, you know, just cause a single reversion on that guy. You know what I mean? Something like that. Let's just find another scenario here where, you know, I'm kind of dry on essences, like right here. I got nothing. I'll just do a no essence or no echo there, just to like save these essences for, you know, the buff Dream Breath. You can't always echo, but what I will say is just kind of like, even if you can't echo, make sure you're using your reversions on CD, even if they're single target, and make sure you're pressing your Verdant Embrace as well, because Verdant Embrace gives you the really important buff. I didn't really talk about it, but when you Verdant Embrace, you can get a 100% increased Living Flame or a 40% increased Dream Breath. And generally speaking, I will use this with Dream Breath, but you know, if you're trying to be a little bit more efficient, especially in single target, you can definitely go ahead and ship a very big Living Flame there. So let's go ahead and talk about damage rotation. There's not really too much to talk about. I mean, you have one spell that you could spam, which is Living Flame. Living Flame is like your main filler. You have your Empower spell, Fire Breath. Fire Breath is really, really powerful. The main power that you have from it is with Scoring Flame, purges off a bunch of buffs. But on top of that, you also get the Living Flame. So when you do your Fire Breath, your next Living Flames hits multiple targets. And what this is like super good for is that it's generally going to give you an Essence Burst. So right there. So as soon as you cast that Living Flames, you're generally going to be able to like disintegrate immediately off that, which is going to give you good mana back from Energy Loop. You have an instant. I don't really use this instant too much unless I'm like trying to kill a totem or trying to slow someone. This is Azure Strike. And then you have Disintegrate. Disintegrate. I won't ever really use a Disintegrate if I'm struggling on Essence. If I'm full Essence, I'll use a Disintegrate. Or if I have Essence Burst, I'll use a Disintegrate. Like right now, I wouldn't Disintegrate. I would Living Flame here. If I'm being aggressive, and if I hit this cap, then I'll use a Disintegrate. It's really nice to use Disintegrate with Essence Burst, because you just get free mana back if you're playing Energy Loop. We'll go ahead and get a free Essence Burst here. So yeah, you can do this. So this is a really nice burst combo here, is when you have the 4 stacks of Temporal Compression, and you are doing a Fire Breath. It's really, really easy to... And you have the Fast Cast Living Flame. You could do the big Fire Breath into a Fast Cast Living Flame into a Disintegrate, and you're always going to have that proc for Disintegrate. So you see here, because you have the Temporal Compression, Fire Breath into Living Flame, Disintegrate, and that's like... Oh, I wasn't targeting anyone. That's like huge burst, and it's really hard, you know, comes in really quick, you know. So that's definitely a great way to burst someone down. Deep Breath is one of those things that, you know, you could, it costs 0 mana, so you could definitely use for damage, but it also like avoids crowd control. I would say more times than not, I do kind of use it to avoid CC, but sometimes people are stacked up, you just can send it. It's just a 0 mana kind of like, you know, do a little bit of damage ability. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. You can use it for damage, you can use it for CC immunity, and you could also use it just for mobility. I would say the main thing to like get used to on Evoker, from my opinion, and sometimes this is like a little bit of a hard habit to break, is you shouldn't ever be doing nothing. Like, if you're waiting for essences or whatever, like, you know, always just start casting Living Flame on a friendly or an enemy. I would say that one of the things that I kind of struggled with early on Evoker is I always thought it was like really awkward to cast Living Flame. It's not awkward. It's actually all Living Flame is doing is it's doing like little damage or little healing, but it's going to feed you these essence bursts that allows you to kind of like play your class more. So kind of think it like as like a combo builder almost, in a sense. Like, you should never be doing nothing. If you can ever be Living Flaming offensively or defensively, defensively it should only be if you're kind of like out the other stuff. Offensively it's better because you get half the mana back. You definitely want to be able to do that when you can. So cooldown rotation and best usage of stasis. So I would say that most games I literally start off like right off the rip. I use dream projection and I use stasis like almost first global like every single game. Time dilation is definitely one of those abilities that you kind of use as you see fit. Whenever someone's like taking, you know, heavy burst, you think they're going to take heavy burst. Rewind is just like a really big reactive button to big burst. Commune is to heal through really heavy damage, especially if you have the life binds out. And rescue is like that really short, efficient, like, you know, put a shield on target. Rescuing people is really important. When I first started playing Evoker, let alone it was on beta, this was one of the things that I forgot the most. So I guess like you kind of just start with your short CDs. You kind of want a dream projection on CD, so you're definitely going to get the dream projection out early. You're going to get the stasis out early. You know, people take a lot of bursts. You could time dilation, or you could rescue, or you could even pop your stasis at that point. And then, you know, rewind and Emerald Communion are kind of like the last walls of defense. You know, those are your two big like reactive heals. Never use Emerald Blossom. Dog shit. Never use it. So the best usage of stasis. This is a tough one. This is a really awkward one to talk about. Okay, so my favorite usage of stasis before last night. This is literally last night. Is I'm gonna put Echo here because like you should always kind of Echo before your stasis. So it's normally Echo, stasis, Verdant, Echo, Bloom. This is what I was doing before last night. This was my favorite stasis, but as of last night, I don't know why, I randomly changed it to Verdant for buff, Echo, stasis, Dream Breath, Echo, Spirit Bloom. And basically what I did here was I just put my biggest spells into the stasis to get more value, especially out of Dream Breath. Because basically you have like 40 seconds of Dream Breath hot this way. You could also Dream Breath here. It's kind of like a decision, basically, like if you want a hot or if you want burst healing. Dream Breath here is also 100% fine. But yeah, it is really important to Echo before you pop this. So like basically what I would do here is, and a lot of the times I don't even pre-Echo with this Verdant, but like I would Verdant, Echo, stasis, Dream Breath, Echo, Spirit Bloom. And I like to charge the Spirit Bloom up so when you pop it, it heals the whole party. And that's been my favorite stasis recently. Because when I'm ready to pop this again, look at this, ready? The Dream Breath hot's falling, we Echo, we pop it, he gets the double Dream Breath again. And it's just more time with that Dream Breath. I should have had the buff up before we popped it. You want to make sure that you have the Call of Ysera before you pop it. But now, guess what? That falls again, and look at that. You know, we have another Dream Breath. It just gives you so much time with that big hot. This has been my favorite stasis recently, like as of a day ago. This is also like super good to do, and there's some games where we're under a lot of pressure and stasis is coming off cooldown, and like my Dream Breath is on CD, and I instantly go back to the old stasis where I stasis, you know, Verdant, Echo, Spirit Bloom, and that's completely fine. One thing that I will say is when you pop your stasis, make sure you recognize who you healed beforehand. And when you pop this stasis, you can Echo the person that you're not verditing, and then that'll give you a triple life bind, and that's actually like really, really insane, because then the Spirit Bloom, since you charged it up, will actually bounce to everyone, and then you get crazy life bind value. But if you're popping this one, you want to echo whoever you want to get the double Dream Breath. So I showed you this one. I'll show you the other one now. So like it would just be this. So you pre-echo. You don't have to pre-echo if you don't want to, especially if you're kind of like just putting your heals in your stasis for later. Stasis, Verdant, Echo, and then like I said, I like channeling the Spirit Bloom here. And then if I were to pop this, I could actually put an Echo on this instead. So my first heal would Verdant here with the Echo, and then also Verdant here, and then my Spirit Bloom would heal everyone for more. So like if I do this, it'll pop, and then we get more lifeline value that way. But yeah, those are in my opinion probably the two best ways to stasis. I would say one of the most important things of stasis is probably getting the Echo in the middle. That's definitely very, very good. There's been times where I'm in a fucking solo shuffle and like my teammate is just absolutely, you know, getting dominated, decimated. I have nothing. I'll literally stasis and just like shove 3 living flames. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you got to do it, you got to do it. These are definitely very good stasises there. Mana efficiency really comes down to making sure that whenever you can pop a, you know, whenever you can get this full temporal compression stacked, like this, bad. You know, take the time to send 1 Echo, 1 Reversion, you know, anything to get this up, and then you could do it. You know what I mean? And then if you can, efficiency is going to come down to just disintegrating. You kind of want to Fire Breath on CD just to proc that temporal compression, but also the Living Flame, because look at that, man. Like this Fire Breath costs 6,500 mana, but it just gave us 10,000 mana worth of like disintegrate and damage, you know? So yeah, you definitely want to try and make sure that you always are able to get your stuff off with the temporal compression. It's not super hard to do. Echo here, and then, you know, you can just kind of like rotate and play around it, right? So right now we need to wait for another thing, but basically you just see how like I'm kind of playing around, like not sending an Empower until like we're fully temporally compressed. Right here it's a little bit, you gotta wait a little bit for another Echo or whatever, but yeah, you can do this here, and then, you know, you can send the Spirit Bloom. Yeah, so mana efficiency really comes down to that temporal compression and getting disintegrates whenever you can, especially when you have Essence Burst. That's literally all you could do for mana. Like when you could also go for early communes. Early communes give you 33,000 mana. It's something that I personally don't do. Like even when we were in like super damp matchups in my tournaments today that we won, by the way. Yeah, that's right. I still didn't really go for the early commune because I value it more as a defensive cooldown over a mana restore. But yeah, you can go for an early commune. Positioning and how to avoid CC/when. This is something on that's really like weird as Evoker, because you're kind of always in the fight. It really comes down to the fact that I think trying too hard to play around like being in a very good position as Evoker means you're kind of playing wrong. You got to be in the fight. You're going to, like, unfortunately you are going to get CC'd, and I think when you need to start trying to avoid, well, you can try to avoid CC, I guess, before you're kind of out of stuff, but when you need to start trying to avoid CC is when you have nothing left. Like when we're fighting against like Mage Lock, for example, I'm literally sitting in the middle of the map. I'm tanking fears. I'm tanking polys, you know, because you have to. Like you don't have an option. I can't play all the way back here by a pillar and have my teammates over there, because guess what? First thing I need to do is be right in the middle. You could obviously try to avoid CC with Deep Breath. You have Shroud. You have Kick. I would say one thing that's really, really underused is you have 2 stops with a Tail Swipe and a Wing Buffet. So you have a Knock Up, which can stop something, and you have a Knock Back, which can stop something. Those are, in my opinion, are probably pretty underused. I like to think I do a good job with them. Maybe I don't even. But definitely recognize those as a stop. You have a Kick. You have a Deep Breath. And you have a Shroud. So you have some ways to kind of like, you know, prevent a little bit of CC. Obviously, you're going to need help with your partners. But I would say, like, when you're trying to avoid CC the most is you have no Shroud, you have no Trinket, you have no Commune, your partners have no CDs. That's when you need to actively be playing like, hey, listen, we can lose. We need to play defensive. You know what I mean? We can't be in this position anymore. So it's one of those things where it's like you kind of have to just deal with it until you can't deal with it anymore. and you kind of get, you know, those interrupts coming back up, or you get a Shroud, or you get a Trinket. It's just one of those things. Like, you can't really play around it because your class does not allow you to. When to Shroud, this is like something that's like kind of silly. I shouldn't really, there's not really too much to discuss. Shroud is basically used at almost the start of every single fight and on CD basically, because there's always so much CC in the game that is available that you're kind of using it on CC, you're kind of using it on CD. Anything other than that would just be based off of like a ton of experience, or like recognizing you know, an enemy's win condition. Like for example, they just one thing, it's bad to use Shroud. Like, okay, let's just say I'm fighting Peekaboo. He just, you know, kidney shot, cheap shot, blind, gouged my whole team. I should probably wait 10-15 seconds before I toss up the next Shroud, because we're all on DR. You know what I mean? Like, you can definitely wait for that. So you don't necessarily need to use it like immediately after a CC chain. Maybe wait for those DRs a little bit, but it's basically going to be very early. Don't use it before a rogue saps you, because they'll just sap all 3 charges off. But if you get in combat, I would even still wait for the rogue to come out of stealth, or otherwise he could just cheap shot all 3 charges off. But yeah, it's generally used pretty early and almost on CD. Utility, CC, and being offensive. I mean, the name of the game with Evoker is offense. Like, if you're not being offensive on Evoker, I'm not going to say that you're not going to do well, because your HPS is really solid. You're missing, I would say, a large portion of your class. Like, you got to understand that Evoker has like big cons and big drawbacks based off the fact that they do have a very short range. They are very susceptible to CC. So having that extra damage is like basically what they bring to the table. So I'm going to show you some of like my tournament games here. This was Luminosity Gaming. So this is no pad. Warrior did 4.4 mil. I did 2 million damage. This is just raw damage. I'm almost doing half of a Warrior's damage. And then on top of the fact that I'm also out healing their Shaman. God, dude, I'd never want to be a Shaman again, just looking at these numbers, bro. Dude, how does a Shadow Priest almost do half? Okay, whatever. But yeah, it's really, really important. So like, when you can be offensive, you want to be offensive as often as humanly possible, okay? I literally lost a tournament game today because I wasn't healing enough. I was being too offensive. You got to find a really good way to balance it. I would say like a general rule of thumb before going offensive is, if your teammates aren't topped, at least have your, you know, your double reversion, your double dream breath hot up on them, and then you could try and go offensive. If you have a full stasis kind of locked in, you have all 3 of those heals, you can kind of let them dip a little bit. You could be really offensive, then you can pop that stasis, get right back to it. You know, if you have like a rescue available, things like that, like you want to be offensive all the time. Dream Projection is here just based on the fact that you could kind of do like some cool things with Dream Projection. Basically, Dream Projection could dispel your own CC. If a priest is running in for a fear and you drop a Dream Projection on yourself and he interrupts you, the Dream Projection will explode, dispel your own fear. You can dispel your own sheeps, you can dispel your own traps. When it cancels, it dispels all magic buffs. So if I were to get fear, trapped, or sheep right here, it would explode and immediately dispel me out of all that. That's why it's here. And yeah, I mean, some of the utility you have is you do have a pressing roar. Obviously, I've been playing with a rogue, so it's just like completely broken. Super easy to do, but you can like oppress roar for clones. You can oppress roar for stuns. Oppressing roar is just really nice. You just throw it before a CC chain, and you know, just kind of makes that CC chain last a little bit longer. You have Sleepwalk. Sleepwalk isn't really that crazy of a CC. It's probably still, in all honesty, better than Hex. And one of the things that's really obnoxious is you can just kind of run around while you cast it. And you also don't really care about being interrupted. So, like, if you get interrupted on a Sleepwalk, you're kind of enabling your team to potentially start casting other spells, which is nice. So you could definitely, like, try and send those Sleepwalks on healers or whatever when you can. And that's kind of, like, I guess your only CC. We talked about your Nox earlier. And if you want to play Terror of the Skies, I personally don't play it. But if you play with a comp that doesn't stun very often, so for example, when I was playing Ellie Boomy, we don't really have a ton of stuns. I actually was playing Terror of the Skies. I would just kind of, you know, make that change right there. And then your Deep Breath will stun. Not as good as the Dev Evoker because it's on a 2-minute cooldown versus a 1-minute cooldown. You have to be offensive with Evoker. Don't go too crazy. Make sure you're healing. Make sure your hots are up, you know. But, you know, Fire Breath on CD, you know, Living Flames when you can, Disintegrates when you have procs and you're not behind. Dealing with kicks, this is a really weird one. And I'm going to be honest, I think I almost never fake on Evoker. Like, you know, I don't think I ever care to fake these Dream Breaths. If you kick me, you kick me. Kick locks outs are shorter. The only thing that I would say is really dangerous is I really generally don't ever fake on Evoker. I don't think you need to. You can fake Sleepwalk sometimes if you like want to bait a grounding or bait a tremor, then try and go for that. There's two spells you need to be careful with getting kicked on. Number one, Nullifying Shroud. That'll lock out your bronze. If you get locked on bronze, you can't like Echo Reversion. And then Disintegrate. I actually got kicked on to Disintegrate today and couldn't rewind. If you get kicked on Disintegrate, you can't use your bronze spells. You can't rewind. Just make sure you understand like what spells you can immediately cast if you get kicked. If you get kicked on bronze, start casting your green. If you get kicked on green, you know, start Echo Reversioning. If you get kicked on bronze and then green, then you're spamming the Living Flame. Sometimes there's been like a really rare occurrence where I think I got like locked on a Shroud and then immediately got locked on a Dream Breath, and I just stood there and I was like like I was not ready to just start spamming Living Flame as my only option. So yeah, it's weird. It's yeah, you got to be a little careful. It's really rare to kind of get like double kicked like that. And honestly, a lot of people kick Fire Breath. A lot of people kick Living Flame just because it's like the only thing that's even long enough to like feel like it's worth kicking. You know what I mean? Like your other spells are just so fast. Offensive and defensive. I mean, it's really hard to say like how to balance this. I mean, the more offensive you can be, I would say the better off your team is in a position. But it really, sometimes you can't do it, you know, like sometimes all you want to do is damage, but all you can do is heal. The best thing I could say is just try and keep up your double reversions and make sure you get the Call Ysera buff, and try and keep up your double Dream Breaths. And if in this situation, if you have these hots and they're kind of healthy, start laying it down, you know, just start pumping the damage. If they're not healthy, you know, maybe toss in a Spirit Bloom, then try pumping the damage, you know. Obviously, generally speaking, healing should come first. You are a healer. But just make sure that when people are topped, then you're doing damage. Because if you're not doing damage, you're not gonna do super well. So comps for Evoker, unfortunately, are just all the meta comps. I mean, you could play any variation of, you know, Sub Rogue, Demo Lock, you know, SP. You could play with War. You know, you could play with Boomy. It's just all the meta stuff. What am I missing here? You can play with Ellie's. Any combination, man. You got Ellie Boomy, which I played. You got Ellie Demo. You know, you got Sub. You could literally play it with Sub SP. You got Sub Boomy. You know, it's just pure meta. You know, you got War Boomy. You got War SP. If you're playing with these classes, you're doing okay. You're just kind of playing the meta. But yeah, Evoker. It's by far the most fun healer I've ever played. You have great mobility, you have great damage, you have great healing, you know, you have great cooldowns. It doesn't get any more fun. If you're looking for a healer to play, if you're a DPS spec and you hate shuffle queues, if you're another healer and you're not good in this patch, this is the healer you want to play. It is probably a little daunting at first because the fact that it's a brand new class. If you haven't played it yet, you're kind of just even getting familiar with these spells. But in general, it is just awesome. So definitely would recommend. And, you know, if you guys have any questions, you are always more than welcome to ask in my stream to get a live answer at least. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. Thank you.